Hey, it's Chris, Liege Games. Let's do this. Now, September, ninth month of the year. So, expectedly, we're going to do 9 crowdfunding games that you need to be aware of that are going to be on a lot of people's radars. You're going to see tons of these videos. The should you backs, the you need to know about these, the this is where your money is going to be spent. That is the type of game we're talking about. And we have everything across the board. You know, some months previously there have been heavier this area, heavier that area. This is across the board, spread through evenly. The dates of the month, but also the mechanisms and the themes and the appeal. And so you really need to be aware because, like I said, everyone kind of thought the end of July, August. I'll be frank with you. September looks bigger, crazier, and potentially more spendy than any of the last month and a half. So, what do you need to know? Do you want more specific thoughts? Check out my Patreon for more specific details and more of my locks from that side of things. But anyway, let's go into all 9 of these games. Now, I'm going to do them in chronological order as well to give you a thought of how you may be wanting to piecemeal things together as well. 8 of these 9 have definitive dates. One of them still has not had a date announced. So let's start with that one for the sake of getting it out of the way. And what is this mystical, magical campaign that does not have a date as we literally are edging into the way of September? And that is Artisans of Splendent Vale. This is a cooperative storytelling adventure style game where you are taking a cooperative approach to this fantasy world of a culture that has come together under a meteor shower where meteors have deposited this magical material resource that you can use, thrusting this civilization into an industrial revolution. And the interesting thing of this is from Renegade Studios, it's also by Nikki Valens, who you may know from Legacy of Dragonholt, Mansions of Madness, that ilk. And so there is a lot of hype about this one going under the radar underground right now. The box, apparently from the prototype copies that have been floating around on social media, is like frickin' Gloomhaven size. So this is another variation of the storytelling adventure. Now this says hex-based style of cooperative game, as opposed to the other ones that we've seen recently with Soul Raiders and Lands of Galzir and Iridia, and there's even one more on this list taking a completely different approach that I'll be talking about in a few minutes here. But this is, sort of the one that is potentially going to be overshadowing everything else of this month in terms of that side of things. Now, what's weird at this point is that there is literally no information on Board Game Geek. There is one forum thread that talks about solo mode. There are no videos. The Renegade Studios side of things has been relatively quiet. I feel like there's potentially like a heavy embargo on content because otherwise I feel like less than a month away from the campaign, we would have seen stuff leak out by now. So I expect it to come when it comes in a big wave. I think I saw Before You Play or one of the Dice Tower have a copy of it, but I mean, as you would expect, but otherwise we don't really know. So it's going to be really interesting when it lines up with the timings of these others, because you'll see that these others are all sort of in these groups of 2 already. 7th, 14th, and the 28th of this month, all of which are on Tuesdays, and all of them already have sort of at least 2 games that are going to be heavy on those dates. And so where is the overlap going to fall? Because you're going to run into competition almost anywhere now this month, regardless of when it actually launches. But keep this one on your radar. Mark my words. Okay, next up is 11, the Football Manager board game from Portal Games. Now, if you're not familiar with the football scene at all, there are actually, when I was doing some research on this, 3 or 4 relatively well thought of, completely different mechanistically games that are taking different features of football and the lineups and the matchups and how you interact on the field out there already. But none of them are mainstream. None of them are by big name publishers. A lot of indie, a lot of very one-shop stops. we really haven't seen it hit the mainstream at all. Because let's be honest, also, sports games are a niche within a niche, and sports games have not transcended the barriers of the tabletop scene very well, very long, or with any sustained effort. And the question is going to be, is this going to be different? I have a preview copy of this, no spoilers yet, but this is one that you want to keep on your radar because this has a very good pedigree standing on it from Portal Games and their ilk, you know, hey, Robinson Crusoe campaign earlier this year. I mean, so they know how to put out a good campaign. They know how to put out a very, very solid game. And this game has reportedly been in development for like 3 years. So you have to be excited about it if you are interested in a football theme whatsoever. Now, the campaign page has very little on it in the first place. So you're just gonna have to wait and see what it actually entails. Now, again, very different than what you're thinking. Not dexterity, not action. This is economic strategy. So not only are you playing the games out, but you're doing the actual behind the scenes management, the transfer windows, the setting the lineups, the team dynamics, all of those issues alongside of it. And you can do one of many different scenarios that are going to be offered. And it's 1 to 4 players. It just looks like something different. And this is what makes it exciting. Stadium boards, club boards, team boards, leagues. There's just everything that I was just mentioning. Now, again, is this going to incorporate anything, you know, realistic in terms of players? I doubt it, because I'm sure there's licensing issues from that standpoint, but that doesn't matter if the gameplay is really, really good. You're doing stadium renovation, financial standing, secret goals even, solo, multiplayer. It just seems to be touching on everything. And so the question is just going to be, what does the price point look like? How much are you going to get with it? And what does the final product entail? Because you have to be excited if you have any interest in this as the largest, most popular sport in the world, period. I'm excited. You should be excited. September 7, check it out on that date when it launches on Gamefound here. Have you had enough high fantasy yet? Now, if you've followed me since the beginning of the year, you've heard me talk about at some point in the various 2 or 3 videos that I've done like this of Agemonia. Finally, it will be launching on September 7 after several delays. And hopefully that just gives us the product that we are looking for in the first place. Because again, this is going up head to head with something like Iridia as a 1 to 4 player high fantasy cooperative storytelling. Again, now this wasn't the one I was talking about though. Storytelling side of things with action, with combat, with adventure and questing. Actioning, maneuvering, everything in between, including combat. And there's a lot going on in this game in terms of what you're going to be actually doing. This is a fully fleshed out sort of tabletop RPG game in an actual board game form. The designer of this game had been running D&D or tabletop games for years and has designed his own world, and this is based off of it. And that just is more to the depth of what you're going into. So this is not something that is off the cuff made up in short form. They talk about moral choices, expansive storyline, and again, how is this comparing to the others of this ilk? And you have to think that there are going to be direct comparisons when it comes to this. There's a lot going on. But it's also relatively streamlined. Turns are easy. 1 maneuver, 1 action. You can tell by this, as well as the previous picture, that there is going to be the Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion type setup with that open book, easy, quick overhead in terms of playing. And it is not 16 different actions that you're trying to memorize. Like I said, 1 maneuver and 1 action on your turn, which is again more streamlined, which keeps people more engaged. Fate cards, skill checks, ramifications of those situations that carry over from scenario to scenario to scenario. There have been 3 scenarios that are already on Tabletop Simulator or Tabletopia, I forget which one, but they have been out for months now. And so if you want to check it out, what it entails, how it differs, and what that looks like, you can. It looks fantastic. The artwork is beautiful. The design looks great. The question is, does it need the miniatures? Oh, the answer is most of the time is probably not. But again, how is the price point going to compare to the others that I've already talked about and mentioned with this, as well as earlier in the video. And that may be the biggest make it or break it at this point, apart from anything else, because again, the question is going to get raised. Which one is right for you, and how do you tell the difference? And can you get them all, or should you be really focusing on one that is more suited to you, even if it means passing up the others and dealing with FOMO? It's launching on the 7th. You need to be aware of it. It has potential for very high six figures. Check it out if you're interested. Now, normally, I'd probably be talking to you about what Mythwin is and how it compares to those other open world games that I've already mentioned and sort of alluded to. Then originally, this was supposed to launch in the middle of September, but they've pushed it back to October. So instead, we're going to go straight to this. We're going to go straight to Masters of the Universe, the CMON style, as opposed to the Archon Studios style. Now, what do you need to know about this version of Masters of the Universe? Well, for starters, CMON just announced that they've got an exclusive deal with BackerKit, whatever that means, that they're going to use BackerKit now instead of their own pledge manager, which people haven't found the most satisfactory, but there's already gameplay out there. CMON has already gotten the relationship with Board Game Co. and Quackalope, and they have put out, I think, either in the last 3 or 4. And so the footage is already out there in terms of the gameplay and their thoughts on it to begin with, over 2 weeks in advance of the campaign, which again is, if you know CMON's track record at all, 1, it's unheard of. 2, it's coming out earlier than ever before as well. Now, the thing that people weren't quite sure about, but is now being highlighted in those videos, is this is skirmish. Now, not just my guys attack your guys and first one to knock the other person out wins. It's more of a scenario-driven skirmish. So there are many different fluid aspects. The other concern, and this is, with the limited scope of these videos, is what are the powers going to look like? Is there going to be power creep? How is that going to fare versus expansions? Because let's be frank, I like CMON games a lot, but some of the expansion stuff that they've put out for some of my games in my collection still is significantly more overpowered than a lot of the stuff in the base game that sells at retail. It just hasn't been well balanced. I'm looking at you, Blood Rage, Arcadia Quest, the others, all of those side of things. It just power creeps up, like you see in video games. And that there's going to be 4 or 5. I mean, this is an IP that's massive for, picking in terms of extras and extras and extras. So what is that going to look like? How is it going to entail? You can be the good guys, you can be the bad guys. It doesn't matter. You can flip back and forth, a little bit of everything. Michael Chenal is one of the designers who did Bloodborne. And so that has a relatively good pedigree because Bloodborne is relatively well thought of in terms of the solid mechanisms. And you can argue and CMON and no, relatively very solid in terms of a dungeon crawl in the uniqueness of adapting to the video game, as well as, making it something different that really stands up. Now, in the videos, you can see that are you familiar with the other CMON games? The Rise of Moloch, which is one of my personal favorite games from that crawling side of things in 1 versus 1 or team versus team. And this takes the 1 versus all aspect of that and the activation system, where the more you activate, the more you give the 1, essentially. And so it helps balance the fluidity of going back and forth, but also if I'm going to do something more powerful and more crazy, it's going to give them the opportunity to do something more powerful and more crazy. And like I just mentioned a minute ago, the flip-flopping, either side can be the 1, either side can be the many, whether it is the good guys or the bad guys, the He-Man side of things, the Skeletor side of things. So if you want to flip-flop, if you want to try it on both ways, you can. Again, how is that going to work? What sort of power creep is there going to be? Castle Grayskull, Archon Studios did it. CMON's going to do it. Just how much? How much? And that is especially true of the scenario side of things. The scenario side of things is going to be the biggest concern. How many different variable scenarios are you going to give me? Because that's going to determine how much this game is repetitive or not. I don't think that there is a campaign mode. I haven't watched all the stuff and heard all the info, but I don't know that there's going to be one. But you never kind of be surprised by what CMON may pull out mid-campaign as well, that they don't always leak in advance. So it's going to be a little bit of everything. It's going to be head-to-head comparison with the Archon one, even though Archon is only in Europe. This one is only in North America, but check it out when it launches on the 14th if you like heavy plastic and skirmish style. Next up is Verdant. Now, you may not have heard about this one, but you probably have heard of the other games that Flat Out Games has recently done. The hits of Calico and the most recent Cascadia. And I'll be honest with you, after having played Cascadia, it makes me excited to see how they can change it up, because let's be also very clear. I don't want a reskin of either of those two games when it comes to putting out something new. And I don't think they're going to do that, because I would argue that Calico and Cascadia can stand up in your collection as two separate yet equally good games. Now, I don't have Calico, didn't appeal to me, but Cascadia, boom. So, what about Verdant? Now, there's not a lot of info on Verdant itself on Board Game Geek, but right here you can sort of see part of what you're going to be dealing with in terms of the variety of different species. And I think that already speaks to me as being different than Calico and Cascadia, because it sounds like the basic gameplay is essentially the same. You're taking a token, you're taking a card, you're trying to spatially arrange them. Again, spatial arrangements are the specialties of those other two games. But you can see right here, it does not appear that I see any duplicates on this picture. And if that's the case, that makes it significantly different than the others, where there is a lot more pattern matching and aligning in terms of Cascadia and Calico. And so that is going to set it apart right then and there. There is a 2-hour playthrough from one of the Dice Tower associates, I believe, on the Board Game Geek page. So if you want to get a little bit more in-depth role play of what it's going to be like, check that out. Because this, just like Masters of the Universe, is launching on the 14th. And if anything, now you can argue that Calico was a flash in the pan, a one-hit wonder, but Cascadia, coming off of that now, is 2 in a row. 2 in a row is not a coincidence, so you have to believe that more eyes are going to be on Verdant than Verdant, you know what I'm saying, than the previous two campaigns, and they do a good job at making it slightly worth your value in terms of getting that little extra promo pack, and they've priced it out in terms of affordability and shipping well on the last two, and I have to believe that it's going to be the same. So this is going to be of a lot of interest. Now, I'll be honest with you, the plant theme does nothing for me. Absolutely nothing. I mean, you know, Beth Sobel, great illustrations, love the actual art, but plants for me is very dry. And so I'm going to be more interested in the gameplay. It's not as appealing to me as Cascadia was and is, but it's probably slightly more so than Calico. So I'm going to be watching. If it's similar, it's going to be a hard one for me to sort of pass up with what Cascadia has shown me that they can do. So that is Verdant, launching on the 14th. Next up, also launching on the 14th, is Altenor Secrets. Now, there's no board game cover on Board Game Geek, but this picture actually encapsulates a little bit of what you need to know about this game too. This also is launching on the 14th. That seems to be the most popular date of the month of the big project so far. So what do you need to know about this game? Why does this game and this picture sort of set itself apart? Because if you're looking very carefully here, you can see that there are rings on this page. We'll blow it up here so you can see a little bit closer. So the artwork, one, looks fantastic. The miniatures look great too. But let's talk about these rings, because that's really what's setting this game apart right now. The rings themselves are going to be rotating and moving. And there are 8 sections in each of those rings in which you are going to have, I believe, 6 characters. And each of these characters are going to have different advantages, different powers. There's asymmetry, essentially. And you are going to be activating them one by one, you know, side versus side, because this is really a 2-player game, although it says 2 to 4 players. So that's going to be the interesting dynamic. I'm assuming that it would be a team, 2 to 4 players, and the higher player counts. I'm not sure what 3 players would look like. Maybe you can play it easily with 3 too, with a third faction. I don't know. But how these rings are going around, the direction in which the things that are within those rings themselves, there are areas, there are locked areas, there are areas of magical importance and power that you can take control of. There is a special magical center. There are 6 different ways that you are going to be trying to earn points going throughout these rings and combating and taking things over. And the goal, obviously, over 4 rounds is to be the one with the most points. Here you can get a little bit better overhead view of what the rings are going to look like, how they may line up, how they may not line up. I really like that in the shifting if you can't get access from every single area, if that's actually the case of how this map looks. Now, if we go back to this picture, you can see the various miniatures allude to different factions. Now, the 2 games that we know in the core box are the Autori Scholars and the Alchemists. So, what are the other factions going to look like? How diverse are they? How is the asymmetry? What exactly are you going to be able to do on these moving rings or not be able to do? How are you going to score those points that I mentioned? They just say that there are 6 ways, but what are those 6 ways? Need more interest, need more details. It's miniatures, so expect a higher price point. And, is it going to be as well at the more than 2 player count? That's going to be the big question when I see something like this. And is it going to be a little crowded on the board if you're going with these larger style miniatures? I don't know, but I'm interested to see sort of the potential that this one has. Altenor Secrets also launching on the 14th. Last up on the 14th, this is Keep the Heroes Out. Now, this is taking a different spin on the tower defense because this is a dungeon defense instead. So, already a different spin on things. Like tower defense? Well, this is an asymmetric 1 to 4 player cooperative game where you are fending off tower defending, dungeon defending against the so-called heroes. Do you like cute or really cool looking meeples? Well, I mean, look at this. You've got little skeleton meeples already, and you've got a little dungeon meeple and mouse meeple. I mean, it's attractive from a different side of things. Not a super dark side of things that you would normally expect, like monsters and dungeons and that sort of crawling thing. So that's really appealing. I mean, the concept is relatively simple, right? It's tower defense. You just have to make it through 3 waves of the advancing heroes of however that looks until you prevent them from taking the treasure that you're guarding in said dungeon. You're going to be drawing 5 cards and having a hand of 5 cards that you're going to be playing on your turn in order to move around, in order to mitigate, in order to defend in the first place. And then after you go, you take the AI deck, which is going to be playing hero cards and dealing with the ramifications of that. Again, I know there's copies floating around. I wasn't lucky enough to get one at this point, but I'm interested because I think, again, it sort of takes the Kingdom Rush side of things and it makes it a little less mathy puzzly, because that was my one criticism of Kingdom Rush in the first place, right? It felt more like it was a puzzle that could be solved, at least the first one, as opposed to this. And I liked a little bit of card drawing. Now, how is the actions going to take? What does the mitigation look like? What are the adventurers actually doing? How do they interact with the map? How is the map constructed? We do have a little bit of information because, unlike those other projects that I've already talked about, this one already has not 1.0 versions of the rulebooks, but 0.5 versions of the rulebook, but also more specifically what we're looking at here with a scenario book. So you can see the treasure on the maps. You can see the special setups. This one obviously called Witch's Cauldron. So again, how does this change? How are you doing this? Off with their heads. Again, you can see a little bit of everything right there in terms of the setup. How much does the setup matter? How are they able to go? It looks like there's rooms and doors that you're going to be going through certain ways. So you may have several lanes here that you're going to be going in. Entrance up here. So again, okay, great. Special rules though. Okay, special rules for each dungeon too. That's looking very interesting. And again, if this is like meeples, I wonder if the price point is going to be lower. Now, I'm not sure with the price of wood nowadays, but it's going to be interesting. So 6 scenarios right there in, I would assume, what is the core game. So that's good. And then we have a rule book here that's only 14 pages. And you can see Dragon, Rat King, Skeleton, Knocker. Okay, so those are the guys that you saw in the pictures. Dungeon passageways and tile rooms, guilds over here. Again, this is right for stretch goals and expansions as well. So building your dungeon, general store, a little bit of everything. They run through everything you need to know. The player's turn, play your cards like I mentioned. Discard to the discard pile and draw back up from the monster pile. Special abilities, each of the characters has one, like I mentioned. And then here are your, wow, that's a lot of actions. That's 13 different actions right there. That's pretty incredible. Again, 9 different room types. Okay, so we got some variability there. I think this looks like a sleeper hit. I think just the price point and the hype and the marketing is going to be a little bit of what determines how well it does. Because it's easy to look at, easy to play. Different difficulties here, so that's cool too. Guild cards, the good guy cards, all the good guy stuff, how they interact, how they steal money. Okay, great. Yeah, all in all, I'm more interested in this one than I was when I started this video. So, if you're interested at all in this, also check this one out when it launches on the 14th. Now we have 2 more at the end of the month, so bear with me here. First up is Beast. Now you may have heard of this one, you may not have. This one has sort of flown under the radar for a lot of people, but I think it has a lot of potential as well. This is taking akin to the Letters of Whitechapel, or the Spectre Ops, if you will, and retheming that, redoing it, remastering it, the shades of Dracula moving around and hiding from the vampire hunters, and transforming it into more of a fantasy theme. Does that appeal to you? If it does, you really need to check this out. Now, this isn't going to appeal to everyone because, again, it's a one versus all, right? One person is the beast and the others are the hunter's trackers. And you're going to be playing cards now. Again, sort of a difference than a few of those others. You know, not completely different, but different ways of utilizing this. And you have to have the card to do the action. And you have a very limited amount of actions that you're going to be doing each turn, especially as the hunters. And so it's going to create more, it says, of a tense dynamic. I mean, you can already tell this one is going to be very aesthetically pleasing. And if they stay with the standees, that's great. I really love the artwork on this. It's very easy to tell. It's not another gray blob sitting on my table. And they're doing this very different system of how you move around the map. You can see here, said map. And you can see all of these different points which have different locations and different ways of doing things. And you can see that they've already got a lot of information as well on the side of the board in terms of what you can do and what things in general do. And so there are also day phases and night phases that are going to change the dynamic between the hunters and the beast as well. Now, the question I have, and the question I wasn't able to, just get off the page a little bit is, and I guess this is, again, ripe for picking, are we going to see more than one type of beast? Are we going to see some asymmetric beasts? Now, it is titled Beast, so maybe not. But I would assume something would be similar of the hunters. I mean, if you play with up to 4 players, well, how many extra hunters are you going to have? Are you going to go with 3 hunters, 1 beast, 4 players, boom? Are you going to go with 2 or 3 beasts and, 5 or 6 hunters, so there is some mixing and matching? I don't know, because therein lies the biggest challenge with a game like this. It is a balance issue, right? You can't have the hunters easily working together to overpower the beast. You can't have the beast so powerful that he can just pick off the hunters one by one without a challenge. And if you're going to add more in there, the dynamic has a real tendency or a real inclination to be very easily shifted. And from that side of things, restraint might actually be the best avenue, especially if they go more like the route of Townsfolk Tussle. Let's be honest. As much as people critique campaigns, Townsfolk Tussle also did what a lot of people don't have the guts to do. They said, you know what, guys? We've got this set, pre-programmed. This is what we're doing, period. We reach it, we're done, we're not adding anything else. You can double our funding goal past that, and we will not do more. Because this is what it is, this is what we know, this is what we've tested, this is what's true to it. And sometimes in these games, less truly is more. Is this going to be an example? I don't know. But, again, as a person who hasn't really been interested in hidden movement games before this theme appeals to me much, 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 much more. And if it does to you as well, check it out when it launches on the 28th. Because it is going to be going up head to head, and stealing from this is going to be this. And this is Mind Clash's latest game that is getting all the hype and having all of the heavy gamers drooling heavily, if you will. This is Mind Clash's take on the 4X genre in space with a heavy Euro, mechanistically speaking, theme. The interesting thing about this, and I'll put this out right at the beginning, 2 different modes, solo cooperative or competitive. Why does that matter? Because you are seeing the Voidfall. The aforementioned title name is actually this cosmic evil entity that has taken over a large part of civilization and used a certain house for its own designations and corrupted them completely and is spreading its evil tentacles throughout the galaxy. And so in the solo and cooperative version, you are pushing it back with tight Euro mechanisms from a very tense situation with a 4X emphasis. The competitive, you are trying to overcome the other houses in the midst of all this going on. The game is played over 3 cycles. Each, they say, with a game-altering galactic event. What does that mean? I don't know, but it kind of is intriguing just to find out. They say focused card actions and decisions are the core of the gameplay, as well as how you sequence them, taking what they say 2 of 3 possible actions that you have in terms of affecting your house. You're going to be playing and improving your technology. You're going to be improving on one of your 3 house-specific tracks, and then you're also going to have tracks that are going to affect your population, your infrastructure, your development, your resources as well. They don't describe the combat exactly, but they call it deterministic. So planning will pay off. This game makes me very excited. It also makes me very trepidatious because I love the idea and the conceptualization behind a fluid, nuanced game like this, but with the heavy emphasis on the Euro mechanisms, it scares me because this is not my forte. Now, if you want more information, I have been skimming over the designer diaries, which are on Board Game Geek, and you can easily find in the forum section. And they talk about it, not going through a rules canon explanation from that side of things, but talking about the concepts itself to relay the style in which the play is going to be. For example, talking about the technology here and seeing that you only get 8 of 26 different technology trees in the game of any game that you are going to play, free of luck from the draw, as they say. And then they talk about the corruption and the way that the Voidfall is going to be corrupting and the 3 aspects in which it's going to corrupt. It's going to corrupt the sectors itself, disabling the population growth, making guilds very hard to establish their presence there. Or you can allow it to reach the inner part of your house and affect the agendas that you have that are going to be the things that are going to try to move you along in your quests, if you will. Or it may trigger something that particularly hinders, they say, a particular aspect of your empire in the first place. One of those civilization tracks that I mentioned earlier. Let's be clear, the battles are not trivial issues either. Now, they say these are not sole ships, but representing possibly dozens to hundreds of ships. And so there is definitely a nuance there that is going to be part of it. And you can see right now, the cubes below and being able to be slotted in there are the fleet power in and of itself. So you can see a little bit of how you can upgrade these, how these are improvable, what you can do there deterministically as opposed to rolling. So does that excite you? Does this interest you? I have no idea. Is it going to be probably mid 100s? Yeah, probably. I'd be shocked if this was less than 150. And especially with Mind Clash's previous release, I forget which one it was, but it came with, I believe, all the colored miniatures like this. I mean, if you're looking at these battles, right, these appear to be pre-painted. I'm assuming, maybe not. But they did that for one of their other previous campaigns, and the prices were through the roof. And so that's going to be the question again with this one. How price pointy is this going to be compared to others of a similar ilk? Here you can take a look at what the game actually looks like from above, though. This hexed, grid-based system with all these elements that are going on each of these tiles to begin with. I mean, there is some die placement. There's trackers going around here, fleets all over the place in terms of that. I'm assuming this is what the Voidfall is there in the inner systems, and you can see how it just kind of lurches all over the place. Then you can also see a little bit from a side angle, some of the tech tree, some of the card play, and then some of the boards as well you're going to be utilizing, as well as some of the Civ aspects that you're going to have access to, for example, like right up here, and how you upgrade them. So again, a lot of information, almost too much to digest. This is going to be a massive rule book. I don't think it's going to be for me. This is an example of what they call focus cards. Again, the art is tremendous, but there's a lot of symbology there. It's relatively language independent. Take that for what you will. So that's Voidfall. Way too heavy for me. Is it still going to tempt me? Yes, absolutely. Launching also on the 28th. So that's it. That is your September roundup. Those are the ones that have caught my eye. Those are the ones I think are going to make waves in some ways or not. We'll see. What's going to be the priciest one of all those? That's going to be an interesting contest. What is going to be the one that raises the most money? Also, very interesting. Most months you would argue that CMON is going to capture it, right? Voidfall, though, I mean, it's definitely going to have, going for the crown. So all in all, we'll kind of see what's out there. We're going to see what happens. And always along the way, there's probably half a dozen or so things that are going to tempt me that I don't even know about it yet at this point. But those are the big 9 in 9. So hopefully that was helpful. As always, thanks for tuning in. If you like this, click the subscribe button. It'd be super helpful, trying to reach 5,000 by the end of the year. But as always, thanks for watching again. I really do truly, truly appreciate it for putting up with me. Stay classy. Have a great day. I'll see you around.